Hi guys, we're going to go into some more detailed work in Seamly2D today. This is a second in a series of how to actually use all the functions in this. The first is how to download it, but there is another video that you should watch before this if you haven't already on how to use the basic functions. This is going to be more advanced functions, little extra things you can do here and there. So the first big thing we can do is actually add measurements to a piece. So let me go ahead and open, just for example, what we were working on last time. Let's see, example pattern. Alright, so to add measurements, custom measurements to a piece, if you at the top here, next to File, Pattern, Piece Mode, Measurements, go into Measurements and hit Open Seamly2D. Okay? And we are going to, let me line this up in my screen so you can actually see it. If this will let me. Oh my goodness. There we go. Hopefully now you can see this better. Alright. So we just hit New. And I always work in inches, so I'm going to go in inches, hit OK, and it gives us this screen. So we can add measurements to our piece. So let's just start on a really basic level. We're making like a tank top. Alright, so we can add known measurements, that's the red plus sign, or custom measurements, that's the yellow plus sign. Most of your measurements that you'll ever need are in here. However, you can add custom ones if they're not. But let's just go ahead and go into Add Known. When you click on any of these, I mean, if you scroll through, there are an unbelievable amount of measurements to choose from, which is fantastic. Everything from pattern making, historical and specialty, tailoring, crotch and rise, legs, arms, balance points, bust, horizontal measurements, vertical, your circumferences, head, foot measurements, even hand, indentations. You get the point. Alright, so if you click on one though, this beautiful diagram actually shows up telling you what numbers correspond to what measurements. So especially if you're new to this or if you just want to find something really fast, this is the best way to do it. So if I know I'm looking for direct heights, just pull this up and I'm going to say, oh, I need my direct height of the waist. Hey, that's number 5. Number 5, height, waist side. So let's just say I'm going to get out a direct height. I'm going to close that by hitting this little down arrow. Width, and we don't need any of those for now. Let's go ahead and start with a waist circumference, which looks like 7. Yep, G7, waist circumference. Let's do that. Let's do a bust circumference, which looks like 4. Yep. And then how about let's get a couple heights going so we can close that. So our verticals, let's see. Let's get, let's see, what's 3? Armpit. Kind of looking for like waist to bust. Here we go. So probably 10. Yep, bust to waist. There we go. We'll just add a few things for now. I'm just going to hit OK. And our 3 measurements are in here. So now, if you look at this, one of these has this whole formula in here. The bust front to waist front, and that is because you could measure from the neck front all the way to the waist, and the neck front to the bust if you're measuring from top down, which depending on what method of pattern making you use could be the case. It can do this math for you automatically so that you don't have to remeasure anything. But I am going to come down here by this name, formula, all of that. I'm going to highlight that and just delete it, and I'm just going to put in a number. So let's just say, for example, from our waist to our bust is, let's say, 8 inches. Why not? For our waist circumference in this formula down here, waist, let's say, how about 30? And for our bust circumference, we'll say 35. Okay, so if I save this now, I'm going to give it a name. Measurements example and hit save. Okay, you can add as much or as little to this as you want. It is completely up to you. So if you go through all of those known measurements, or if you're doing something different and you know it's not in there, or you can even honestly call these different things. So if you just put them in, you could always rename them. That's okay. But you could hit custom. And let's see, let's give it a name. Let's say foot. Or actually, if we're trying to stay on the top half of the body, how about bust to, and you spaces, you have to do underscores or dashes, something. Bust to neck. Sure, why not? Okay, so that's now called that in our name. It's called bust to neck. And we'll say that that is 5 inches. Let's say 6. That sounds closer to what it probably is for most people. Alright, so you can do custom stuff. Again, you can do what they already have in here. Let's go ahead and save that. We'll exit out. Alright, so I am actually going to start a new one just from scratch just to make this easier. So let's just hit new. There we go. This opens up a new whole pattern. I have to hit new again to get a pattern piece going, and let's just call it basic example. Alright, so from here, we're going to start kind of how we did last time. Most of my plotting at the beginning starts with this point at distance and angle. So if I go straight up, in the example I showed you in the last video, you can just type, okay, 10, 90 degrees, whatever. If you hit this F of X button at the top, so right now we're looking at the length where it says 10, hit this F of X button. I'm going to delete all of those numbers that were at the top. And in my measurements, oh, you know what? I forgot to actually load it. So backtrack just a second. Up on the top, next to File, Pattern Piece Mode, hit Measurements, and you want to load that individual we created. So we're going to go to Measurements Example, and now it's in here. That part's obviously important because otherwise it doesn't show up in here. But that also allows us to change what measurements files we're piling from. So if I made a t-shirt and I made it to be kind of custom sizable, I can pull up different measurement files. So for example, I could input my own measurement file, and then if my sister wants one, I could go back into measurements, load individual, load her measurements instead in the same exact pattern, and print one out for her. Alright, so now that we've loaded that, let's go ahead and draw that line up again and go back to F of X. So now that we're in their measurements, look at all of these that have showed up. All of these are in here now. So instead of typing any number, I can just put bust to waist. Okay, 90 degrees, okay, zoom fit best. Let's zoom out a little bit more. And there it is. I don't have to remember those numbers. So then I could even create a different pattern down the road, and instead of having to remember my measurements or type them in here again, I could just load that same measurements file and keep using my measurements over and over and over in different patterns. It's so great once you get the hang of it, and once you have the measurements loaded in the system, it makes it really fantastic. So then let's just real quick, let's do it one more time. Let's go to the right here. And for my length, we're just going to delete what's already there. Let's say waist circumference divided by 4. Our angle is 0. Make sure you're still changing the angles on these and hit OK. Zoom out a little bit, and there we go. Alright, so now that we know how to pattern off of measurements, we're going to do a couple other things with these F of X buttons. So let me get a few more lines in here for you so that I can show you how to do that. Okay, so one of the other things we can do, let's take another point, and we're going to take this pattern and reverse it the other direction. So I'm going to click there and point the opposite way. Now, for my length, that on this part, I could put bust circumference divided by 4 again. Or I could put length of line, and this is line A1 to A4. So right here is line A1 to A4. Double click that, and that way, and let me put my angle in, and actually in my angle I'm even going to make the same thing. Angle of line A1 to A4. Okay. Oh, actually, we don't want to do that. Let's just make it 180. Otherwise we have to do quite a bit more of that. Alright, so zoom fit best. This is now an exact opposite of it. So what we can do though, because it's off of our measurements of this line instead of the measurement file, if we were to mess with this line over here, and actually in my window, let me find this up. Mode, pattern piece. Okay, I want to see my tool options. If you go to pattern piece, hit tool options. There we go. I want to be able to look at all this. Instead of having to right click things, if you have your tool options up here on the right, I can go into my f of x and everything from here. I can change the name of that. I can just put numbers in here, angles, whatever. So anyways, since this point comes off of the length of this line, whoa, what is that? Instead of the measurement again, if on this side, let me move this so that you'll be able to see it. If I say plus 1 inch and hit enter, both lines move. Let's do that again. So we'll take that inch away. Both lines move because this line, its length is depending on this length. So whatever this one's doing, this one's going to do too, which is really great once you get into more complicated patterns and you want to start adding like little seam allowances and some slack and things like that to do it equally throughout the pattern. So you can also do this with the angles of things. So for example, if I have a line going like this, and I'm just going to punch some numbers in here for the sake of punching numbers in here, and I need another one up here going the exact same angle and length, I can do that. So in my f of x, once again, my length of line, and that's A1 to A6, and you can search here too in this filter list by keyword. I could type A6 and it's only going to pull up that one. That way once you get like 100 different points going, it's a lot easier to find what you're looking for. Okay, so we added that for the length. And then we want the angle too. So I'm going to hit f of x for the angle, delete the numbers that are automatically in here. And let's hit angle of line this time. Again, I'm going to look for A6, angle line A1 to A6. Okay. Okay, and look, now it's the exact same at the same angle. So if I come to this one and I want to add an inch, both of them are an inch longer. If I change this from 318 degrees to 320 degrees, both of them move together, which is so great once you get into really complicated stuff. All right, you also, and again, this is where it takes a little math, you could make this line opposite. So maybe I want it to be opposite. I'm going to add a negative in the front. And now it's mirroring on the top. Maybe add 180 degrees, and now it's mirroring on the vertical line instead of the horizontal line. You can do a lot with these angles to get very specific things going on. This is a big deal, especially for quilting patterns, that if you're making complicated patterns, that everything matches up really perfectly. Alright, next we are going to make a line from the length of a curve. This is something that I do a lot when I'm making neckbands, especially for t-shirts. So something we could do, I'm just going to make a really quick curve. Also, by the way, when you are using this curve pattern piece that has curve tool using points as the control handle, that one that you need to click 4 spots, you can actually click 3 if you want. You can go once, you can click the same spot more than once. So I could click top twice, whatever. It's just that the first and second points have to be separate, but otherwise you can click doubles on things and that's fine. Alright, so we've got this curve. Let's say I need to make a neckband. I'm going to hit new pattern piece. Let's call it neckband. Okay. Where did it go? I panic every time. Don't worry, just hit zoom fit best. And I can see this teeny little red dot down here. And I'm going to move him. So in my tool options, the position over here is X and Y. Let's say 5, let's say 0, zoom fit best. Look, now he's all the way up here. You just have to zoom fit best and find that little red dot. Let's move him over on our x-axis more. Let's hit him at 10, zoom fit best. There we go. Now he's out of the way. Alright, so I want to make a line that's the length of that curve. I can do that. On my point, hit this point at distance and angle. I'm going to click the point, that starting red point for my new pattern piece. Let's just go straight up, why not? But for my length, hit f of x, delete that, and I'm going to go to a length of curve. This is the only curve that exists so far, and it's A3 to A4. So I'll click that, hit OK, my angle's 90, bam. That line is the exact length of that curve. And obviously that's not just for neckbands, you can use it for all sorts of things. That's just the most common one that I use it for. Alright, you could also make a curve from angles and curve lengths and control points of other curves. So let's go back. If I want to switch from my neckband back to my other one, next to where it says new pattern piece, there's the pattern piece and a drop down. I can switch between, I could have 20 different pattern pieces going on one pattern, especially if I'm making like suit jacket, even button-ups start to get really crazy with how many different pattern pieces are going with interfacings and everything. But you can just switch back and forth, okay? Alright, and I'm going to zoom out just a hair. Okay, so what I'm going to do is going to make this curve, I'm going to make another one, starting at, I don't know, let's say starting at this point. Why not? Actually, let's make it backwards based off of that, if that makes sense. So we're going to hit curve. This is where this really basic one comes in, and this is why I don't ever use this. I could hit this button and make the exact same curve by just remembering where I clicked. So I clicked once on each end and twice in the middle. So if I do the same thing on this end, it's going to be the same curve. But if I wanted to do this differently, or for some reason have to do it differently, I could click a curve there and click a curve there. So then, my C1 angle, if I go into f of x, I can do my angle of curve, and I need C1 angle, so it's angle 1 to be the same as the other curve in the pattern. Hit OK. Okay, and this is where it's going to start to get tricky, because you're going to have to like opposite everything since it's mirrored. So it's going to have to be, I have to think of this straight, negative, and I think I have to add 180 degrees too. This is the part that gets hard because you're just going to have to start messing with it a little. The length of it's also going to have to be changed. Your control point, that's this, and it's the first one. Okay? Alright, and let's mess with that because that top does not look right at all so far. So let's subtract the plus 180. Nope, we definitely need that there. We don't want it going upwards. Nope, yeah, so the negative plus 180, that was correct the first time. Alright, so now let's do the second angle. F of x, delete what's in there. Angle of curve, now we need the second one. There we go. And I'm just going to add 180 this time because it's on a straight line, so that should be all we have to do. And then the length, delete that, and we are going to length to control points down here. Second one, okay. And voila, we've got an exact replica going a very complicated method. But if for some reason you have to do it that way, you have to do it that way, right? That also helps, like, so ideally if you had done a simple curve initially and just maybe grabbed it and gone like this and you needed to replicate that, that is why you would go the really crazy way instead of just clicking the points again. Alright, so now that we can do that, we're going to go get into a little bit of detail work. So next to draw, instead of draw, let's go into details. So I'm going to create something real quick for us to mess with in the detail. Alright, so if we click on details, so I threw a couple things in here. They're just roughly anything. These don't actually go to anything. Alright, so there's a couple things we can do. If you remember from the last video, if we right click and hit options, we can add seam allowances. We can add labels if we want. Let's open that up. Here's my example one. Okay, let's say pattern piece A, bodice. Cut one on fold, annotation on fold, I don't know, whatever you want to put in there. Oh, and actually on the label we have to hit labels and make it visible. Not 13.3. There we go. Okay, so if you open that, you can also add a grain line. I don't think I talked about in this last one, and so I want to make sure I hit this. You would just turn grain line visible on, and the rotation is the angle that you want the grain line. So this is like the arrow that says to cut this direction. Maybe I want that arrow to be 10 inches long at 90 degrees. Okay. And then I can actually grab that and drag it around my pattern. This is especially helpful if you want something cut on the bias, because then you can put 45 degrees. Okay. At this point, you can even grab this little square down here and make it shorter or longer depending on your needs. Alright, so then you can even, actually really quick, let's just go ahead and give this one a seam allowance real quick and a label. Remember, open it. Okay, we'll call this piece B. Say it's a neckline. Sure, cut to, why not? Oh, right click options. I almost always forget to come back over here to where it says labels and turn that on so that it's visible. It's the detail label visible. Next to pattern blah blah blah. Piece label data. Hit labels, make it visible, make it at least 3 inches tall and wide, hit OK. There we go. If this is too big or little, it also has a little black square on the bottom that you can just grab it and change the size of it as you need so that it's how you want it set on your pattern piece. Alright, so let me go up to pattern piece. I need to see this details tool. Okay, so come down here where it says details, turn that on. And I used to have these next to each other. I don't know why it's not letting me. Maybe if I hit that button. There we go. It should, when you download this, automatically have these two set up for you. I think I accidentally exited out of them one time. Alright, so anyways, in your details, if I click the neckline, it kind of highlights it for me. If I click this, it kind of highlights that over there for me. But when I go to print this, I can turn pieces off. So if I make a pattern and I have 4 different variations of sleeves on that pattern, I don't have to print all 4 variations every single time. So for example, right now, if I go to my layout up here next to details, and let's just leave the settings as they are, hit OK, yes, it's going to put it on here for us. Okay, it's automatically going to print all of it because it's all turned on. But let's say I only want the bodice. We can come back to details, and on this neckline piece, where it says details over here, there are these green check marks, I can turn it off. And then when I go to layout, this little settings button lets us pull that create new layout up. Hit OK, yes, and now it's only the bodice. Okay, and if I want to turn that back on, just click it again, and we've got that green check mark. So this is really helpful because then I can draft multiple patterns off the same thing. I can have variations going on and only print what I need to print, which is obviously great because we're not wasting all of our printer paper. Okay, so then the last thing I want to show you is changing the size in this layout. So in the layout, and actually let's go ahead and pull both pieces up. Oh, look at they are. So if we come to this button, create new layout, we can change the size of this quite a bit. So I usually just leave it as is because it comes up with a pretty good layout, but sometimes when I have like 15 pieces, it makes it really wonky and it's wasting a ton of paper. You can mess with this a little bit. So let's, instead of a 24 width, let's say a 15 width. And then on our height, we're just going to leave it as is and see what happens. Let's hit OK, yes, and now it's going this direction instead. And look, it's actually using, it looks to me at least, like it's using a lot less paper. So you can mess with that as much as you need to. Sometimes I mess with it quite a bit. The other settings in here also kind of change things just a little, like this gap width and shift offset, things like that. Sometimes we'll change things. Sometimes the rule for choosing the next work piece changes the layout a little bit. This is something that if you're just not happy with the way the layout's going, you can just kind of play with this. It's going to be different for every pattern. There's no set rhyme or reason to how to make it waste the least amount of paper. So that part you'll have to play with. I hope this was helpful and that you enjoyed this second part. Make sure you subscribe for the next videos in the series. Thanks for watching. Bye.